Okay, let's open a word of prayer. Lord, thanks for the day. Pray you bless our time together, and pray you help us to make some sense of some of the rather intense happenings in the world as we get closer to the return of the Lord. Bless us today in Jesus' name, amen. Well, so I've been looking for a good graphic. I think I finally found one that kind of works for getting closer to midnight. So this week we're going to title this, You're Scaring the Canary. So it's a little different. I don't know, I think that's actually called a canary resuscitator. So if they took canaries into the coal mine, the canaries started having trouble, and they actually carried a resuscitator with them to revive the canary. So I get, well, I don't know if you would fit in that, but the canaries seem to be more prone to carbon monoxide than anybody else. So we're going to talk about that and a lot of the things that are going on in the world that fit into our little wheel of prophecy, which are kind of take the scripture and put little graphics with them. Just a couple reminders. I will be doing an Israel trip October 6th through the 16th. If you go to fbchapel.com, there's a link. You can email me also. There's a link to my email on the church website. And next week I'll have an email set up for the trip, special for the trip. So that's I don't know, what is that, 10 days? You're responsible for getting to Israel. That's part of the deal. Because people coming from all over, it's too hard to arrange airfares and that type of thing. So get to Israel on your own, however you want. You can drive. A little bit difficult. Be careful coming through Syria, or Iraq or Iran. But so that, and then there'll be a 5-day extension option on that. We're going to try to do a little bit more in the homeland part of Israel that unfortunately gets ignored a lot, not because people just don't care about it, it's just because it's a little more difficult to get to. So we're working on that. We're still working on parts of details of the itinerary. And so if you want to stop, like take a day and stop in London or Rome and go to London and go to and see all the great biblical artifacts at the British Museum in London, that'd be great. Or go and see how Christianity was paganized in Rome. So that's your option, your choice. So also I did a roundtable this week on technology with Patrick Wood, Rich Gillette, Pete Garcia, Scott Townsend, and myself. I think I got all of us. And that is up on the YouTube channel under the live tab and also under the videos tab. I'll do some, I know I'm going to be on Hope for Our Times with Tom Hughes tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern. And then I've got some, Wednesday I'm going to do a little roundtable on Israel and Zionism and anti-Semitism with Olivier Melnick and Rob Schwartz. That'll be at 11 a.m. Eastern. I know some of you have to work, but, take off. No. And so I'll do that. And I've got some other interviews and things planned this week, too. So plenty of things to talk about as we go forward. And as we get closer to this time, I'm increasingly convinced that I sort of nailed this one, in that all of these things are going to be sort of accelerating and converging. And I was watching a political show this week, and they were talking about the acceleration, the acceleration of the accelerating, or the accelerating of the acceleration. Everything is just happening more and more quickly. And then I sort of have a view of the scroll, that the scroll may be progressively open. The first seal opens and you can read what's there. Then you can open the second seal and it unrolls and you can read what's there, and so forth. And I think I got that graphic right for that. But some people think you have to open all the seals, but then if you have to open all the seals, then you don't know what's going on until the whole scroll is open. And I just don't see that that's the way that it happens. But that's a controversial thing, but it happens very quickly. Daniel chapter 12, but you, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase. Although I heard, I did not understand, he says in verse 8. Then I said, my Lord, what shall be the end of these things? And he said, go your way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end. Many shall be purified, made white, and refined, but the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand. So let me move forward here to where I think I'm supposed to start today. Okay, well, things are changing. So things are changing dramatically in the defense area. And everybody's coming up with very sophisticated, expensive weapons. So this is India now has a hypersonic glide weapon. That's kind of and that can be a bit of a game changer. Now, the question right now is how accurate are these things? Are they able to hit a moving target? Because if the target moves like a big ship, can that change at the speed that it's going? Can it change direction quickly enough? So that's again, when I talk about acceleration of things happening, the convergence of all these things happening, logistics, some of these weapon systems that we read about that we think are at least implied in Scripture have to be developed. They have to have logistics and they have to be functional. And you'll see one story this week where it's sort of like a throwback, but it sort of ties in with what the text of Scripture says. You'll see that in just a moment. So India's developed a glide weapon, and I probably will forget about it later. Israel has announced that probably later this year, their Iron Beam will be operational, field operational. Now, that could be a game changer. Again, though, that's a very difficult thing to do logistically. I mean, it's easy. Everybody can make a laser and point a laser, but you have to get the laser and you have to get the heat build up. So it has to be on the target long enough. But then right now at least, the laser weapon, laser defense system has a very limited range. Maybe a kilometer, maybe a mile. So if you have a missile coming through rather quickly or a drone coming through at any kind of speed, you have to be able to train that laser on the same spot on the drone for the whole period of time. So they're working on that, and I'm sure they're going to develop that. There's a lot of things going on with drones. I saw a great video where they use like 8,000 drones in a drone show, light show. But the comment that the person made was pretty perceptive, was if they can get all these drones to do the light show and make all these pictures in the sky, and then they all come back and land, those can all be weaponized. But you also have to remember, too, that there are limitations on drones. For example, you have a drone, and if it has a little battery-operated engine, it will only go as far as that battery-operated engine. And it's just like your, I can't say my Tesla, but I have friends who have Teslas. And if you drive really fast on the freeway, you're going to get less range with your Tesla. So that will also be true with drones and batteries, because if they move more quickly, they're using more power, therefore they can't go as far. I was reading an article this week about the Shahed drones that Russia has been using a lot in Ukraine. They're manufactured by Iran. They carry, I'm not sure, I think it's about 100 pounds of explosives. I mean, they can make a big hole in something. But they're not very fast. They're not super maneuverable. They sound like if you get a whole bunch of them flying at the same time, it's like everybody in the neighborhood is mowing their lawn at the same time. They kind of sound like a lawnmower. They have these little piston-driven engines. And they're developing them, but they have limitations. So, for example, the Shahed drone has a range of about, I think it's like 1,500 kilometers. So what's that? Maybe 1,000 miles. So they can fly a Shahed drone all the way from Iran to Israel. That's about 1,000 miles, depending on where you start and where you end up. But it's not getting back. And this is the problem with a lot of these, the logistics of a lot of these things and these attacks that need to happen. And remind me when I talk about Iran to talk about attack on Iran, talk about logistics, because I think that's important. One of the other things, we talked a little bit about this at the technology roundtable the other night, the development of central bank digital currencies and cryptocurrencies. And I will say that if you're, I know that I don't own cryptocurrencies, I will be honest with that, which means I haven't made any money from them, but I haven't lost any either. But they all, people are making a lot of money from them. I've read stories of people that bought Bitcoin early, they sold out, and now they travel the world because they made enough money. But there are going to be people on the other side, they're going to lose money as well. But this is a story. Now, this is from credible sources that Trump has been big on cryptocurrencies. He said, no way are we doing central bank digital currencies, but we're doing cryptocurrencies, which are in the blockchain, and central bank digital currencies, I think, are just a form of that, a little bit different form of that might be issued by a central bank. But my understanding is Trump went on this one coin, one mem coin in cryptocurrency, and he personally made about $385 million last week. So how was your week? And you were worried about whether you could get the 2-for-1 deal at Wendy's, I know. But so there's a lot of money to be made, but it comes with a great risk. And everybody's moving towards this digitization. So here is I've been meaning to play this for a few weeks. This is Larry Ellison being interviewed by Tony Blair at the World Government Summit a few weeks ago in Dubai. And this is one of the big conferences. You have Davos, which is going to be in Saudi Arabia next year. You have the FII Institute, that's also out of Saudi Arabia. You have the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, SPIEF, that's in St. Petersburg, Russia. These are where these big elites go and talk about these things. So here's Tony Blair, a clear globalist, talking to Larry Ellison. I remember Larry Ellison is involved with Stargate. He was there at the rollout of Stargate, which was not, in a technical sense, it was not a public-private partnership for the development of AI. It was the government was going to help build the power centers so that the AI server farms could operate. These things are growing so fast and so exponentially. You drive out towards Granville and you can see 25, 30 giant construction cranes there north of 161 where they're building the Intel plant. And that thing is off and on, but Intel stock went up about 15% the other day. So maybe that's project is completely on. But just for the server farms that they're building in Texas, they have said that Texas will need 30 nuclear plants to run those by 2030. Well, how many nuclear plants have been built in the United States in the last 30 years? Has there been one built? I don't remember. I'm not aware of any. But what they're doing is Microsoft has taken AI and they've loaded all of the regulations on building nuclear plants into AI. And Microsoft has spent more money on research and development in the AI and tech space than anybody else. They've spent billions and billions of dollars. So what they're doing is they're training one section of AI that they have on the nuclear regulations with the goal that they will be able to figure out how to build a nuclear plant in a year as opposed to 10 years or 15 years. Because, as you know, 2030 is not 15 years away, or it's not even 10 years away now. It's 5 years away. So there's this tremendous demand, it appears right now, for AI. But I will also say, you remember when cryptocurrency came out, there was the big concern that it was consuming all of the it was going to eventually consume all of the electricity. But you don't hear that anymore, do you? And part of that is because they got more efficient in what they did. So as you see these AI chips and everything develop, they're going to be much more efficient than the prior generation. So you might have a 1,000-fold increase in the chip's computing ability, but its power consumption might actually go down because of efficiency. So if that happens, then there's not as much demand on the power grid. Okay, so here's Tony Blair, Larry Ellison, and remember, he's talking about a certain kind of injection to help you not have cancer or cure cancer and that type of thing. But here, I think he talks a little bit more here about, and I'm not sure that he knew what he was talking about, to be honest with you. He's a very wealthy guy. He's like, what, third, fourth richest person in the world, but he may have overstated his case a bit, but here he talks a little bit more about what he wants to see happen.
And when you come to government and what government's doing, there are artificial intelligence tools, and some of them I know that Oracle have developed around financial management for government. But also, tell us a bit about what, because you're right at the forefront of this revolution, what it means for what government should do in terms of its digital infrastructure, digital ID, data centers, and so on.
In other words, if AI is really this great, how do I take advantage of it? Because the impacts are enormous. And it's very interesting because almost no one is talking about that. Everyone is talking about, and I will answer the question in just a second. Everyone's talking about these fantastic NVIDIA chips that allow us to build these huge AI models, how the data centers, Oracle's building a 2.2 gigawatt data center that costs between 50 and soon $100 billion to build these data centers and train these models. Because these models are so expensive, you won't build your own, as a rule. There'll be a handful of these models. The question is, how do you take advantage of these incredible AI models? And the first thing a country needs to do is to unify all of their data so it can be consumed and used by the AI model. Everyone talks about the AI model, and they are astonishing. But how do you provide a context? I want to ask questions about my country. What's going on in my country? What's happening to my farmers? I need to give it my climate data. Now, it probably has your climate data already, but I need to know exactly what crops are growing in which farms, and to predict the output. So I have to take satellite images. I have to take those satellite images for my country and feed that into a database that is accessible by the AI model. So I have to tell the AI model as much about my country as I can. You tell part of the story with these satellite models. You give it a huge amount of information. You tell it where roads are, where borders are, where your utilities are. So you need to provide a map of your country for the farms and all of the utility infrastructure and your borders. All of that you have to provide. But beyond that, if you want to improve population health, you have to take all of your healthcare data, your diagnostic data, your electronic health records, your genomic data. And in the Middle East, in the UAE, for example, they are incredibly rich in data. They have a lot of population data. The NHS in the UK has an incredible amount of population data, but it's fragmented. It's not easily accessible by these AI models. We have to take all of this data we have in our country and move it into a single, if you will, unified data platform. So we provide context. When we want to ask a question, we've provided that AI model with all the data they need to understand our country. So that's the big step. That's kind of the missing link. We need to unify all of the national data, put it into a database where it's easily consumable by the AI model, and then ask whatever question you like.
Okay, so that's what he wants, is all data into a giant unified database. Now, this sounds very much like Revelation chapter 13 in many ways, and they want your data too. So there are concerns. Patrick Wood expressed this, I thought, pretty eloquently the night during the round table about what are all these guys doing at the federal government. Is that data, our data, the government data, being hoovered up into this unified data platform? And Larry Ellison knows what he's talking about. He owns a company called Oracle. I think he owns an island, one of the Hawaiian islands, Lanai. I think he bought that a number of years ago. Extremely wealthy, probably worth over $100 billion. And if the stock market goes down 20%, he's only worth $80 billion. Do you think it really has a big impact on his lifestyle? Probably not too much, but he is big on data. Oracle is a database company, so he knows what he's talking about, and he wants all of the data. That's what, and they talk about this at these conferences openly. It's like, we want all your data, and we're going to get all your data, and we're going to hoover it up, whether you like it or not. And it's kind of interesting. Facebook, one of the other uber wealthy guys, I think he's actually worth more than Larry Ellison, Mark Zuckerberg from Facebook, he gave us Facebook for free, right? It doesn't cost anything to be on Facebook, does it? Well, except if your privacy has any value to it, yeah, you're giving up your data and all of these terms of service for everything that you load on your computer. There's a terms of service, and you always how many read through all that garbage? I'm a lawyer and I don't read through all that garbage because I know what it says, and it doesn't make any difference because if you don't click on agree, you don't get the software or the program. So they have us, and there's very little privacy. I mentioned in the roundtable the other night, I know Patrick talked about it at a conference in Coeur d'Alene yesterday. I was an attorney. I still have a law license. I get ads every day, 3, 4, 5 ads a day on my Facebook feed and my Twitter X feed that want to give me a legal assistant for AI. And then it always has an older attorney, somebody about 60. I never realized how wonderful this was and how I don't need associates anymore. And if you've ever been a partner in a law firm, I was an associate at one point in time, but now, associates are if you can get rid of that cost, you make more money. And partners seem to like to do that in law firms. So this is happening. So I get these ads all the time. And then my question is, how are they going to train young lawyers? I know at least 15 years ago, I was talking to some of our management people in the firm. We used to, I see Kevin sitting back there, and Bill, lawyers. You used to try cases as a lawyer. If you were a trial lawyer, you went to court and tried cases. And I know one year I picked like 15 juries, which was just an incredibly busy year because you have to have the whole case ready. And I even finished one on Monday and started one in another town on Tuesday. And I was busy. But what happened was the federal courts and now the state courts, they want to settle the cases. And what do they always say? If both parties hate it, then it's a good settlement. It doesn't matter who's right or wrong, but then cases don't get tried. I was in a county here in Ohio, it was outside of Columbus, one common pleas court judge in the whole county, so it's not a huge population. The judge had not tried a civil case in his county, in his court, in 17 years. But he got his full salary the whole time, and he'll get his pension the whole time. And my question to my partners was, how are we going to train young lawyers to be effective in going into court and presenting something? And then on the other side of that too, the trial training seminars that we send people to really got focused more on not so much how you effectively present facts, but how you appeal to people's emotions. And so we became very postmodern in the way that we did that. And then when you see this in the church too, it's appeal to people's emotions. Don't present them with the facts of Scripture or the archaeological record or anything like that. Appeal to their emotions. And so it permeates everything. So here we go with AI. So this was a big conference they had in AI in India just a week ago. I haven't even had time to, there's so many conferences now, it's impossible to keep up with this stuff. Should India build a sovereign foundational AI model? So one of the big discussions there was, hey, all these companies are building AI. Why shouldn't the countries in which they operate build their own sovereign AI, because it'll be a big deal in the future? So now imagine all the companies want to build their sovereign AI, but what's the mother's milk of AI systems? Data. So if they're building sovereign AI, they're going to try to get data from everywhere, including all of your stuff, from your tax returns, maybe your 401ks, maybe your W-2s, your 1099 forms that you get if you're an independent contractor. They'll take all that stuff and they'll hoover it up. So that's a big concern. Now, let me talk just about a few topics. I'm going to go back to AI in just a second, but I want to talk about a few things. So this is Robert Morris. He was the founding pastor of Gateway Church in Dallas area. And he resigned last year because of allegations, and now he's been indicted in Oklahoma for lewd acts on a 12-year-old. So, look, I'm not going to say whether he's guilty or not. That's for a court and jury to determine whether he's guilty or not, but whether the prosecution has proved their case beyond a reasonable doubt. Sometimes we think, well, he was found not guilty, so that means he didn't do it. That's not exactly true. It just may mean that the prosecution didn't prove their case or their witnesses weren't that good. And when you start getting out into kids that are 6, 8, 10, 12, 13 years old that are the main linchpin of your case, their testimony, it gets pretty difficult. Pope Francis seems to be hanging on like Generalissimo Franco did. Remember that standing joke on Saturday Night Live? It was Franco's still alive, and it was Franco is still dead. And so he's kind of come back. But this is just kind of interesting. This is the New York Times today. Pope Francis projects a lonely moral voice in today's politics. Really? Now, so if you're a lunatic leftist, you might actually think that that's true. I can remember do you remember when he came to the U.S. to speak? I think it was 10 years ago. He went to Congress, and in Congress, he gave 3 examples that we should follow. One is Martin Luther King Jr., who was a communist leftist. The other person he cited was a lady named Dorothy Day. She was a Catholic, and she lived with a guy, and I won't go into all that, but she started I don't know, the Catholic Worker or some newspaper. She was a radical Marxist, socialist, leftist, communist. But that was a great example for Pope Francis. That's who you should follow. And then the other one was, and I can never remember, is it Thomas Merton or Robert Merton? Thomas Merton? Thomas Merton. And I've done a lot on Thomas Merton over the years. He was a Cistercian monk, lived down around Lexington, Kentucky. But he considered his brothers to be people like the Dalai Lama. So he actually made a pilgrimage. In fact, his last trip was a pilgrimage to Tibet to meet with the Buddhist monks over there because they are our brothers. And the Dalai Lama will say, he was my brother. He was very, very important connection that we make. And that's how this mysticism, and he's incredibly influential. He did die on that trip. He reached for to turn off the light in his hotel room and was electrocuted. So, and by the way, when he died, he was so influential that the front page of the New York Times had his obituary. Amazing, amazing. So here's a little inconsistency. Looks like they're building a brand new highway. This is from the BBC in the Times of the UK. They're building this highway through the Amazon to a city called Belém. Why is Belém important? Because it's where the big climate conference is going to be. So they're tearing down the jungle and the trees to build a highway so the elites can fly there on their private jets to go to a conference where they're going to come out and say, you people need to cut your carbon footprints. They shouldn't call these climate change conferences. They should call them giant carbon footprint conferences. Climate conference hosts hacked 4-lane road into rainforest. That's from the Times of London saying that about what they're doing. And it's true. A little more on AI. AI will soon be smarter than humans. Let's discuss. Big article. This is in the business section of the New York Times today. And this thing is developing very, very quickly. I don't know how accurate it is all the time, but they're also coming up with quantum computing developments and that type of thing. This is another article this morning. AI can now get the vibe right with creative writing. So I guess that just means that, we don't need any more speechwriters for Obama to make things up. AI can do it just fine. And then NASA caught purchasing controversial AI surveillance software. Now, wait a minute. Why does NASA need to buy the surveillance software? I'm not sure that's in their, well, maybe it is in their mission statement, and we just know what their mission statement is. This article in the editorial in the New York Times, Times of London, we can't ignore social media dangers anymore. There are a lot of people who are putting their kids on a phone fast child rearing method, or I don't know what it's called, but they're not allowed to have a phone or an iPad or anything like that. And don't get any ideas, Pam Haller. Have humans passed peak brain power? Well, there's probably a connection between the two of those. The dumbing down of America, the moroning of the world, I guess we could call it. This is the UK. Sentencing rules for minorities are like a get out of jail free card. They had this thing called, the prime minister is called two-tier Keir Starmer. And remember, he had a little bit of a confrontation with J.D. Vance in the White House and the Oval Office recently. And J.D. Vance gave a couple great speeches in Europe at the AI conference and then over at Munich. And then he also confronted Starmer about it. And Keir Starmer, the prime minister of the UK, he didn't even know I don't think he understood what J.D. Vance was talking about. So they've been calling him two-tier Keir over in the UK. because they have two-tier policing. And so what you'll see is you'll see these Hamas, Palestinian supporters go out, they'll tear down things, they'll threaten people, and then if you go pray in front of an abortion clinic, you're going to get arrested. And you'll get sent to prison, and they won't. They won't even get tried. They won't even have to post bail to get out of jail. So there's two-tier policing, and now they've come out with a new law which sort of takes the two-tier administrative part and enshrines it as two-tier sentencing. So if you do this, and it's all social media, and I see these videos every day on my feed about policemen confronting people. There was one guy, he was just taking pictures of a street in London, and they came up, "What are you doing? Show me your ID," and all this. You know, of course, then there's people back there marching and yelling, "Kill all the Jews," and that type of thing, and they're okay. But if you're just walking down the street, it's very, very intrusive. It does seem to be that that's Sharia law, in fact. Thank you for pointing that out. Back to the prior slide. This is Dr. Eli David. He's one of the biggest accounts on X behind Elon Musk, and I forget, he might be number 2. Congratulations to Multi Hamid Patel for becoming the head of Office of Standards and Education in Pakistan. Oh, wait, sorry for the typo. He is the head of Office for Standards and Education in Britain. Someone also from that religion is, I believe, now the head of Justice Department in the UK. So, look, I don't know that the UK is lost. People are fighting it, but I don't see anybody really talking about it that much, and it's very concerning. You can go to London, you can see the Magna Carta. At least it's still there, but who knows how long it will last, because they really want to put in Sharia law. So this has been kind of an interesting phenomenon. The election of Donald Trump. Last week I showed you a picture from the Wall Street Journal about Putin and Trump and everybody in a roller coaster and the hair flying and, you know, people screaming and that type of thing. And so the foreign policy, they sort of took that theme and built on it, and they call it Trump world. And then you see America's new foreign policy. Obviously, there's somebody sort of doing that. This is a big article in Foreign Policy, The Art of the Deal. And it has been a bit turbulent. Trump has come in and he's done things, and he's getting pushback in the courts. These courts are coming in and saying, well, I don't care if you're the executive under the Constitution in charge of this in the country. I'm going to tell you what to do. And I'm going to put in a nationwide injunction. This is totally unconstitutional. But you know, if you go up to the Supreme Court with this, it takes time. So they've said you can't fire people, you can't do this. Trump came in this week and said, okay, look, Colombia, you had these protests against Israel, you threatened Jewish students with violence, and it's not just, you know, we're against Israel marching around. They're attacking their dorm rooms. They're pounding on their dorm rooms in the middle of the night. They're making them leave classes because they can't stand to be in the same room with them. So it's not this. So Trump said, listen, you're not going to do this. You're going to do this, then there's a consequence. You're allowed to do whatever you want. We don't have to pay for it. So I'm canceling $400 million in contracts. So even the French newspaper Le Monde gets in and says, Trump declares war on Columbia University, American bastion of progressivism. So now if I read that headline, and being a conservative person politically, I would say, and I didn't know about Columbia, I would say, oh, well, thank you for identifying a target. Okay? And so they've come out, there's a letter here that Trump issued his administration issued to Columbia, and it has some things in here. So there's some things here that, listen, if you want to get the money from us, you've got to institute these proceedings. There's like 13 or 14 points. And the board's meeting at Columbia to try to figure out how do we keep the money? Because $400 million is a big deal. Now, they have a huge endowment. Harvard and Yale have huge endowments. They could run on their endowments and not charge tuition to anybody. I saw another thing about education in the United States. It used to be that there was like one administrator for every 20 students. Now, in some of these, there's it. Okay. Did you hear that? 4 administrators, used to be 1 administrator for every teacher, which seems to be pretty high to me. And now it's 4 administrators for every teacher, and the percentage increase of administrators that don't teach and don't coach or anything like that, it's just, and they make salaries and they get offices and you have to build bigger buildings and then they have they have pensions you have to pay. I mean, it's crazy. It's just insane. So and this has happened in higher education at the university level. There's all these vice presidents and administrators, the vice president of bathroom access or something, you'll have a title. So here's some of the things that they're supposed to do. Mask ban masks that are intended to conceal identity or intimidate others. Seems reasonable, with exceptions for religious and health reasons, of course. Deliver a plan to hold all student groups accountable. Formalize, adopt, and promulgate rules, a definition of anti-Semitism, and empower internal law enforcement. And so now everybody's got their knickers in a knot, panties in a bunch, whatever. And they're, some people are stifling, they're chilling themselves. They're not speaking out, which I'm trying to sort of like, is that really a bad thing? If it's a bad idea. And then here, this is from Times of London, U.S. fires up anti-abortionists in Britain. Horrors, right? And I saw one where there was a guy who was charged under the Abortion Access Clinic Act and was pardoned by Trump. I don't know what happened. He was being sentenced the other day in a state court for the same thing. And what did he do? He went there and prayed, handed out roses to the women that were coming to get an abortion and say, look, we can help you if you want. And he will probably go to prison for that. It's insane. So even this is Jerusalem Post this morning, academic freedom under siege. Now listen, I don't know this guy, and he just needs to come spend some time around us, okay? Because what was the problem with the whole, listen, I went in academia, I was a graduate assistant almost 50 years ago, and I could see it coming because what was happening back then? If you had conservative views, you were being stifled. And nobody like David Harrell was running around during Obama or Biden or anybody like that saying, oh, academic freedom's at stake. But let somebody come in with a different viewpoint and, his knickers are in a knot. Trump has arrested this guy at Columbia, and everybody's saying, oh, it's an attack on free speech. David French, who styled himself as a conservative, now writes for the New York Times and other places. I have no respect for the guy. And he was writing a thing about, freedom of speech is what's important. No, this is not freedom of speech. This guy's here as a guest, and he has certain rules that he's supposed to follow. He's not following them, and he should leave. Of course, they have all these videos. Oh, look at him. His wife is 8 months pregnant and all that. Okay, put him on a plane back to wherever it is together. There was even a thing where these drug people were being sent back to Colombia or someplace. Did you read about this? And a judge The plane was in the air and the judge ordered the plane to return to the United States with these terrorists. This is insane. And I would just say, I'm sorry, I didn't get that. Over. I'm sorry, we're having some static. Everything must be a satellite thing. So, and this is Financial Times. Tariffs on goods may be a prelude to tariffs on money. That's kind of interesting. And part of the reason Trump's getting into the cryptocurrency is that's what a lot of organized crime people use, and you want to be able to get those assets, and those assets are being brought in. So they're setting up a sovereign cryptocurrency fund in the United States. We used to take their gold, now we take their crypto. This is the example of the administrative state gone crazy. Johns Hopkins slashes more than 2,000 jobs due to USAID cuts. So Trump cuts USAID. Johns Hopkins has to get rid of 2,000 employees. They were getting like $800 million a year. For what? To spread those loony ideas all over the world. It was money laundering on an epic scale. And I don't have time to go into this. There's a link to this. This is a good article. I think I talked about this a while back. It talked about what Obama did and how he controlled the narrative. He changed the Democratic Party. He put all of these institutions into place. And I believe when they start unpacking all of this funding, they will find that the government has been funding all these left-wing NGOs through money laundering on an epic scale, all directed by this guy. It's interesting. Even the back of his head in a silhouette is very clearly identifiable. Rapid onset political enlightenment, how Barack Obama built an omnipotent thought machine and how it was destroyed. David Samuels in the Post. Okay, so let's talk about the Middle East in the 3 hours we have remaining. Sometime I'm actually going to do that. What was the line in the Out of Africa movie? When the gods want to punish you, they give you your dreams. So anyway, there's been a settlement with the Kurdish forces and the new Syrian regime. And Jonathan Spire wrote an article a week ago. I'm not going to go into it, but let me just read the first two paragraphs. The declaration last week by imprisoned PKK leader Abdullah Öcalan was of a ceasefire in his movement's long insurgency against Turkey is a significant moment deriving from major changes currently underway in the region's strategic situation. At the same time, it does not indicate the conclusion of the long conflict between the Kurdish movement and the Turkish state. Peace processes between the Turkish movement and the PKK are not new. There have been three separate ceasefires between the movement and Erdogan's party, which has held power in Turkey since 2002. And then you also have this thing called the SDF, Syrian Defense Forces, which is the Syrian branch of the Kurdish forces, but they don't always get along with the PKK. The PKK are considered terrorists by Erdogan in Turkey, but Erdogan sees that they're Kurdish, so the SDF is also terrorist, but Erdogan's the one in charge now. He's running the show in Syria through his puppet, al-Jilani, or al-Shara, whatever his name is this week. So this week there were, I mentioned this last week, it was just starting to come out into the news last Sunday about these attacks in the coastal region of Syria, there on the western part of Syria on the Mediterranean. Latakia, the Russian bases were there. And it's very hard to get information. There are some reports that 7, 8, maybe as many as 22,000 people have been killed in the last week. You can go, there's a X account called Hamas Atrocities. But I'm just going to tell you, if you go to that account, you're going to see things that you won't be able to unsee. You're going to see piles and piles of bodies and people shot and mutilated and all that type of thing. And I mean, and it's page after page after page of these things. So it's been very brutal. So the al-Jilani, al-Shara, this Al-Qaeda, Hamas, not Al-Qaeda, ISIS guy who's now the president of Syria, they're taking revenge on the Alawites. The Alawites, the Assad family came from that, at least adopted that sect. I don't know how religious they were, since they were making about $2 billion a year off an illicit drug trade in the area. So they've gone into this area and they're just slaughtering Alawites, but they're also killing a lot of Christians. And so it's like all the ISIS stuff. And so everybody's running to Syria, shaking hands with al-Jilani, al-Shara. Oh, great guy. You're a wonderful guy. Israel's taking advantage of this. So Israel's kind of moved into taking over this buffer zone in southern Syria. And they've been destroying, though, when they find out there's a weapons depot somewhere, they go destroy it. They've taken a lot of things. So here's al-Shara this week signing the new Syrian constitution. They've got a new flag. It's the 3 stars. Used to be 2 stars under Assad. Now it's 3 stars. I'm not sure what that means, but maybe it's because Syria's 3 parts. I don't know. I think this is a good picture of al-Shara, al-Jilani. On the right, sort of a split image of what he was before, what he is now. Erdogan was warning last week of sectarian violence. Erdogan, by the way, he's spending a lot of money on arms. He has, outside of the U.S., he has the largest army in NATO, military in NATO in terms of people. And Turkey has been a leader in the development of drones. They may be the world leader in selling drones. And they're fairly, you can see their jet engine, they have afterburners. And these are not Shahed drones that like Iran is making. These are the real deal. And so their company is one of the largest drone manufacturers in the world. So this thing in the Alawite region of Syria, everybody's upset about it. This is the Tehran Times. Of course, they like the Alawites because the Alawites gave them what they wanted. They gave them a way to get weapons to Hezbollah. And it's such an interesting thing because Hezbollah doesn't appear to be a big force. I think they're still a threat, but they don't appear to be a huge force right now. Israel destroyed 80% of it. There were an interview this week with Nasrallah's children and they said after the Beeper attack, when was that? September, October last year? It seems like it was like a year ago, but it was just a few months ago when they did this tremendous beeper and pager operation, blew them up, and then really severely injured a lot of people. They were left blind, maimed for life. And sometimes in a war with them, you have to humiliate them. That's sort of the standard that you have to go. It's not like, us fighting the British, where we fight the British and then we go have lunch with them and then come back and fight them. And that's not quite that way, but you understand what I'm saying. It's much more, it's not brutal like it is in the Middle East, but they said that Nasrallah was severely depressed after that attack. And I'm like, good. I hope he died a very sad, miserable person. Because that's what he did to everybody else. So this week, kind of interesting, they're the Druze, which are these are people that are getting together to sign the Constitution. And one of the problems with the Constitution, so they signed the Constitution, and immediately everybody comes out and says, there's problems with this new Constitution in Syria. One of them is, it talks about one religion. And the Druze are like, well, wait, we're not Sunni Islam, and the Kurds are like, well, we're not really that either. What about us? And so they signed this. And so now there's a lot of people complaining about this. The Druze, after the 67 war, there's a community of Druze. If you've ever been to Majel Shams up at the base of Mount Hermon in Israel, it's a Druze town. And you'll see, and they have sort of a distinctive dress, not that they wear these white hats with the red top. That's their imams. They claim to be descendants of Jethro, which wasn't he the father-in-law of Moses in the Old Testament? So they claim to be that, but they're kind of Muslim, but not really Muslim. But anyway, so the communities were separated. And then, because of the border there with the Golan, they haven't been together since 1967. So Israel opened the border up and brought 100 Druze from Syria into Israel. And then they were going down to a Druze holy site in Tiberias. And why did Israel do this? Well, Israel's trying to ingratiate themselves with the Druze. It's sort of the tribal view. We'll be nice to your tribe, and then you'll be nice to us. Even though we're against your government, oh, that's okay. We don't like them either. We're more concerned about our family and tribe and that type of thing. So they had this big meeting this week. Israel, there's supposedly this secret agreement with the U.S. that Israel can go, and there's been some strikes in Lebanon recently, and everybody's really upset about that. All across Syria, there are these shut factories that show that Iran is over in Syria. So this is a big deal. So I'm going to move back to Iran in just a little bit. First, I'm going to talk a little bit about Ukraine. So there's all this stuff, Trump says it's got a ceasefire. Putin says, no, you don't. Walter Russell Mead, great historian, says, listen, he doesn't like Putin. And because Trump seems to be making nice with Putin, Walter Russell Mead is upset. Everybody's upset about everybody everywhere. Putin has continued to attack, even though there was supposedly, at least Ukraine had agreed to a ceasefire. So the G7 wants to put more sanctions on. And Trump got upset and was putting sanctions on Russia too. Putin came out and said, I'll back the ceasefire, but on my terms. Trump came back peace or I'll ruin you. So there's a lot of back and forth. Putin says the Ukraine ceasefire must solve the root causes of the invasion. To which I would ask, which invasion you talk about? You mean when you invaded Crimea back in 2014 and took it over? Or you talk about the one you did started 3 years ago? And everybody, believe me, you want to get in an argument with somebody, just say you might have a little bit different view of the Russia-Ukraine thing than they do, and everybody declares war on you. It's kind of crazy. So Ukraine's retreating from the areas of Russia. Russia's coming in at them hard and heavy. I don't know if... I don't think Ukraine can hold out. They're running out of people. Putin's not running out of people. He's getting them from Chechnya and North Korea and in countries in Africa. He's bringing to Ukraine. So they have these weapons. These are, Ukrainian weapons. These are things that we gave them to allow them to strike deeper into Russia. Then we have this artillery that we gave them. And so, Trump seems to, he just says, well, I'm just trying to make peace. I'm not for one side or the other. Yes, but then he says stuff like Putin doing what anyone else would. And everybody goes, what are you out of your mind? And so eventually this will get settled. Russia, now the thing about this is that Europe and all the think tanks are going, okay, this is what we've wanted all along. Europe to build a big army. And that's fine. And so when that happens, we have people follow Bible prophecy, and one of the baskets, so I have and is sort of an Islamic empire end times thing basket. I have an EU revived Roman Empire basket. So all the people that only look at this, they're like, oh, look, this is it. This is the revived Roman Empire. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. We'll see how it goes. They have some problem. Germany is in very dire straits economically. Poland, I may have used this article last week. Poland is to call up every man for military training. This is kind of unusual in Europe. And then this article in the Financial Times, German army struggles to get Gen Z recruits ready for war. Most armies don't get 60, 70-year-old guys to go fight war. Well, I'll help you as soon as I get my joint replacement rehab done, or something. And so you get young guys. But in Germany, what they're finding is they don't want to serve. So it was before the war in Ukraine started, Germany had 200 conscientious objectors in the whole country. So, I'm against war for conscience sake, and I can't do this. Now they have over 3,000. So it's a over tenfold increase in just a couple of years. And a lot of them are saying, I'm not gonna go serve. And I saw it's kind of interesting, this problem we have with males, young males today, and who's the guy who does the Dirty Jobs show? Mike Rowe. He was doing a podcast this week with somebody, and he said, these guys aren't working. We lost all of it. We've had this increase in jobs, and there's like 8 million young males that aren't in the workforce. But we've had like 4 million jobs come back after the health crisis. But they're not filling them. They're just, what are they doing? Well, now translate over to military. And that's a problem. And then you have a demographic problem. They're not reproducing themselves. So, but everybody in Europe, they're all excited. We're going to do this. This is the Times of London this morning. Kremlin missile threat highest since the Cold War. There's these cables being cut undersea. There was this big collision in the North Sea with this boat loaded with chemicals. And it turns out that the boat that probably caused the accident, the guy running that ship was under a flag of another country, but he was Russian. So was that an intentional thing? And it was a big hazardous thing. And the question is, was that an intentional collision? It doesn't pass the smell test. It smells even worse than it does with just the chemicals burning. So the Baltics are upset. They don't know what to do. Russia's coming. By the way, this is what the Russia looked. Well, I pulled the wrong map. Never mind. If I went back to 2014, early 2014, there'd be really no red areas. So in 2014, Russia took over Crimea, started moving into eastern Ukraine, and now we hear where we are today. Okay. So this goes under the category of wars and rumors of war. China's been threatening Taiwan. So I've been getting information on this. I'm a bit skeptical. I've read a lot of different reports about the capabilities of China vis-a-vis Taiwan to invade it in a land invasion. So China this week was released. China's been building these big barges. And you can see this barge comes in. There's a picture up there on the right. They can actually stack them together so they can bring all these tanks and that type of thing, and they can drive across that bridge, across this bridge to the land. Now, it's not that easy. So they've been designing, they've built about 5 of these. I hear they have another 2 to 5 under construction. And some of my friends think, okay, China's going to invade Taiwan, no problem. But this is different. Okay, so I'm just going to present sort of the alternative case not saying China's not going to do it. I'm not saying they're not capable of doing it. I was a trial lawyer. Okay, trial lawyers were kind of like the pathologists of the legal profession. You know, the pathologist always tells you what's wrong. You know, your number, you're 1/10 of a point above the line where there's a problem. You know, 0.1 whatever milligrams, your blood work is just off. You're 0.1 milligrams out of, wow, really? So anyway, so you see how they have this, but it's a very difficult invasion. Now, the Chinese came out about almost 20 years ago and talked about we need to be able to do some things. Now, so the question is, can they do a land invasion today like the Allies did at Normandy back in 1944? It's a different world. In 1944, there were no precision missiles, precision mortars, high-powered ammunition rounds, drones, and that sort of thing. It was bad enough at Normandy for the guys who were bravely invading there. And the distance, by the way, across the channel from England to Normandy is about the same distance as it is from China mainland to Taiwan, about 90, 100 miles. So what do you have to do this? And so this is where I kind of come into the logistics thing. This may happen, okay? And people say it's going to happen, but I think it needs to be looked at a little bit more deeply. That's just my opinion. How do they do that? How do they logistically do this kind of an invasion? Well, their military doctrine that they developed about 20 years ago said, we have to control the air, the sea, the land. We have to establish a beachhead, then we can bring these big barges across. It's not like you bring these big barges across because they're kind of sitting ducks, assuming that Taiwan and its allies have the missiles and everything to attack them. But, you know, this big barge is kind of a big target. And then you have one tank coming off at a time. And to me, it just seems like if you're prepared for that type of an invasion, you could repel it very easily. Now, if you really degrade the forces that would be doing the defense and their capabilities, their defense missiles and that type of thing, then you got a much better shot. So this Council on Foreign Relations did a thing, why China would struggle to invade Taiwan. They wrote this last year, and they talk about the fact that, and you can see this thing is, it's like 1.5 football fields. No, it's about a football field in length. And but they got to come across the beaches. It's sandy soil. These things have pillars that they get. And China is like, we're going to fight this. China is investing huge sums to develop the capability to bring Taiwan under its control by force if need be. At the same time, invading Taiwan or mounting a successful blockade would be the most complex military operation in modern history, and China's military has not fought a major war in more than 7 decades. And that's all true. So one of the ways that you would do this, this is a picture, this is sort of the not unusual conditions in the strait between China and Russia. I'm sorry, China and Taiwan. And you can see that's kind of rough oceans, not easy to transport things. And then there's, well, we'll take passenger ships and we'll sort of make them, they look like passenger ships, but they're really barges. We'll reinforce them. But again, you still have the same purpose. The other thing that they didn't have back in 1944 was satellites. It would be pretty easy to see, okay, they moved all their barges to this part, they're going to attack here. And these are big boats, and there's not that many places where you can attack in Taiwan. So logistically, it's very difficult. They have a mile of shallow water, different than what they faced at Normandy. So here's another graphic, shows all they have. So here's their military strength, and their assessment, and they said, look, we've got to control everything. We have to separate the enemy from any logistical support that they might have on the land. Now, Taiwan has a problem, though, and China will probably exploit this. China imports 29% of their coal, 20% of their gas, 44% of their oil. So what would they do? They would do a blockade, and they would have oil reserves 5 months, gas reserves 2 weeks, coal reserves 1 month. That's not very good. So if they do an effective blockade, Taiwan's in big trouble. Taiwan may just surrender because they can't live. They import 70% of their food. They maybe have a year's supply of food. So that's going to be a big problem. And that's a war, rumor of war. And people have been talking about this for years. I don't know where we are on that timeline. I will say this. For Epic Times, Kyle Bass did an interview about a month ago called about why China's economy is going to collapse. They're in major economic problems, way beyond anything that we have. Their real estate market is collapsing. And part of that is because their population is collapsing. By the way, they have a lot of empty cities and the Palestinians there. Problem solved. Thank you. So Witkoff, now Israel's a little upset that the U.S. has seemed to go around Israel. Israel's upset that the U.S. has gone around Israel to deal directly with Hamas. Israel's not happy with that. This is a good article in Jerusalem Post. There is a link in the show notes. Don't have time to go over it. This is a intelligence analyst from the United States who's been looking at October 7th. And she's gone back and said this was planned for a very long time. This didn't start October 7th, 2023. Actually, the arrangements, the relationship between Iran and Hamas goes back to about 1992 when George Bush 41 was in office. So this was this article in Israel Hayom. Again, I don't have time to go into it. But what it talks about was 6 hours of horrors, what this article says. 500 terrorists versus 0 fighters. The extent of the failure in Nir Oz, that's one of the kibbutzim along the Gaza border. The last terrorist left the kibbutz 40 minutes before the first soldier arrived. The forces fought fiercely, but the chain of command collapsed. The conclusion, if given warning, the damage could have been reduced. So there's a lot of assessments going on. By the way, one of the stories, I don't think I did a screen grab of it. One of the stories is that there were 18,000 people coming across the border every day from Gaza into Israel to work. They made friends with the people in the kibbutzim. They worked with them. And so a couple weeks before, so Nir Oz was, I think, the worst kibbutzim damage. People captured, dozens of hostages, people killed. But if you understand Israeli politics, and I've been down there and I met these people, they're wonderful people, but it sounds pejorative if I say that, I'm sure Peter, Paul, and Mary is on their playlist, okay? And not the Peter, Paul, and Mary of the Bible, okay? They're peaceniks. They love peace. Some describe them as hippies. And they go down there, they live in this collective, they love being together with people and working, and that's great. But they live there because they wanted to make peace with the people in Gaza. So a couple weeks before this group comes over to the kibbutz Nir Oz, and they meet with the people. 2 weeks later, those people came across, kidnapped and killed people, same people. And so what does that tell you? And they're saying like, well, wait a minute, the people we met with to make peace with came and killed us. What does that say about the enemy, and how do you respond to that enemy? Now, Iran. Israel has to do something with Iran. They're on the clock. They have to deal with this problem. IAEA came out this week and said they have enough enriched plutonium for 6 missiles. Now, can they put it on a missile, weaponize it, and launch it against Israel? Nobody knows that. They're buried in these deep underground bunkers. The missiles are in underground bunkers. We have a weapon. It's called an MOP. There's a Moab. That's a big bomb that you can just drop off of a pallet, and it makes a very big hole in the ground. But there's one called a MOP, M-O-P, and I forget the number that it has. It's like GBU 57 or something like that. And it's about 30,000 pounds. Its payload is only about 6,000 pounds. The rest of it is reinforced, super strong steel. And so what it's able to do is it's able to like go down into the ground until it hits and then go through reinforced concrete and then explode. The problem is we have B-1B or whatever bombers we have, the B-52s and others. It's 30,000 pounds. Israel doesn't have an aircraft that can carry that kind of an ordnance to its target. We do. There's been a lot of exercises with B-52s and is it B-1B or B-2s? B-1s. Over in Israel, I think the B-1 can carry 2 of these and drop them. But understand, it's 1,000 miles away. You have to refuel them, maybe on the way and back. But there's sort of a time gap here where the air defenses are down in Iran. They have them, but they're from like back in the Iran-Iraq war back in the 80s. And so until they're resupplied, you have a window of opportunity, but that it's been a couple months now. Everybody's been talking about, we've got to do this. It's imminent. It's going to happen. And it hasn't. It's very concerning. So they have to do something pretty quickly. The political situation in Iran is very favorable. This is an article in Times of Israel. Again, there's a link in the show notes down there. You should read it. And what Channel 12 in Israel broadcast a report this week with video that they got from people within Iran. And the people in Iran said, we hate the regime. We love Israel. Do what you need to do. In fact, one of the people that was interviewed said, make sure you get Khomeini's house. And some of these are former Iranian Revolutionary Guard people. The economy is in shambles. But what they were showing was pictures of these luxurious shopping malls and very luxurious homes and villas that are by the elite power class in Iran. You know, the Ayatollahs, the IRGC. And so the way Iranian government has been structured, the Ayatollah, I hear he lives fairly simply, but he controls a fortune of over probably $100 billion, something like Larry Ellison controls. And then they piecemeal out parts of the economy to like the IRGC and other groups, then they handle that stuff. But there's corruption everywhere. People are skimming off the top. They're building luxurious homes. But the vast majority of Iranians, like, we have no ability. We're stuck. We don't even have jobs. We can barely afford to eat. And these people shop in these luxurious shopping malls and live in these big, beautiful homes. So there's a lot of unrest in Iran. And so right now, the people are saying, come attack us now, and you won't have to deal with Iran. We'll be your friends after the government falls. But the problem is it going to be a friendly government, or is it going to be the IRGC that's going to take control? We don't know that yet. Here is the Crown Prince, the son of the Shah. He's in his 60s now, and he was interviewed. Here's a little interview with him.
Royal Highness Reza Pahlavi, Crown Prince of Iran, it's a great honor to sit here with you. Thank you so much for this interview.
It's my great pleasure, and I'm happy to speak to your audience.
Thank you. So, as the son of the last Iranian Shah, Do you believe the Ayatollah regime will fall soon?
The regime today is at its weakest it's ever been, for a number of reasons. The first reason is obviously the fact that it has lost complete legitimacy vis-a-vis the eye of the Iranian people, who in their greatest majority just reject the system as a whole. For years, they thought that the regime might reform itself, but today, most people, including former reformers, believe that it's time to move beyond this regime. The call to death to the dictator is often being chanted in Iran. The people have had it. So I think we are very close to change, but we believe that we are beginning to see more cracks within the regime, more defections are beginning to happen, and all of this is a sign that the regime is becoming more and more vulnerable, and there's an opportunity for real change very soon.
If you had the opportunity to lead Iran, would you do so?
You know, I've always said that my pledge to my country the day I started, which is 44 years ago, was only a unique goal of seeing Iran free from this regime and to bring about an alternative to this clerical dictatorship in the form of a secular democratic system for the future.
It seems that there is historic opportunity that won't come again with Iran. What do you think is the best thing Trump can do? And what do you think is better, negotiation or attacking nuclear facilities?
Neither.
Okay, interesting.
Because diplomacy has basically failed, because the whole premise of Western diplomacy up to today was to pursue behavior change by the regime. Simply meaning that you have yet to understand the DNA and composition and nature of the system. If you want to achieve peace, you have to find partners in that, peacemakers. The Iranian people that are not represented by this regime are the peacemakers. We can be the solution to the problem, not this regime and whoever is represented by them.
Okay, so by the way, Channel 14 is a conservative channel in Israel as opposed to some of the other channels, but they only do in Hebrew. So if you go to Channel 14, open it in Chrome, and you go up in the URL, there'll be a button there to translate it to English. And the translation is pretty good. So open it in Chrome and do translate. I think Brave also will translate it, and maybe Firefox, I don't know. So this is an article by Seth Frantzman, by the Jerusalem Post staff, today. They're building on the Channel 14 interviews, and they say, former IRGC officers speak out against the Islamic regime in rare interview with the Israeli media. And so they're ready to fall. They just need a push. Israel, you need to come and push them. At the same time that they're doing this, so this week there was this, Iran, Russia, and China began their annual joint exercise in the Indian Ocean with their navy near the entrance to the Persian Gulf around Oman. And then this week, China and Russia and Iran had a big sit-down meeting, and they said, we're all on board. We support Iran's peaceful nuclear program. So that's going to be a problem. And I'll save the rest for next week. So but that sort of brings echoes of Ezekiel 38 and 39. And I don't know where we are on this. It's always interesting when you sit and talk, well, Ezekiel 38 and 39 will happen here, and then that will take care of all these problems, then this other stuff can happen. But what if Ezekiel 38 and 39 is not here near the beginning of all this, it's closer to the end? That kind of upends all of your assumptions and conclusions. And so we'll see how it unfolds. I guess that's the best way. And if I'm not taking a firm position, it's because I don't like to be wrong. And but I've been around a long time, and I can just say this all the time. And when I talk, I do interviews and stuff. We in the Bible prophecy community, we didn't really see a lot of this stuff coming over the last 5 years. And we have to be humble enough to admit that we kind of got it wasn't a curveball. It was sort of a curveball, spitball, and knuckleball all at once that kind of came at us, dipping and weaving. So again, I'll be on Tom Hughes tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern, and then 11 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday with Rob Schwartz and Olivier Melnick. So and I think I have some other stuff scheduled, but it's a very interesting time to be alive. By the way, this is Purim in Israel. If you're ever flying to Israel, by the way, fly on Purim. You'll have, we went to Israel 2011, and we flew on Purim. So there were, we booked the flight, and you don't want to pay the price for first class, so you try to get two seats to get an empty seat between the two of you. Well, I booked a seat in that 5-seat middle section on the plane, and I had the whole thing to myself. So I had like 20 things, Pam will laugh, I had like 20 things plugged in, recharging them, so I was ready to go and I could lay down and everything. Look at her back there, she's waving her arm, I took everything, took over the whole row. I had the whole row to myself. You had the whole section to yourself too, so you're welcome. Okay, so let's pray and get out of here. This is, but pay attention because there's a lot of things happening, and I think that the cover of Foreign Policy this week with the roller coaster thing is a perfect example of what we're going to be like. Have you ever seen those videos where they're in the launcher? It's like this thing on these giant rubber bands, and they go flying, and they're sitting there, and the people are really scared. And then the guy goes, "Oh no, your seatbelt!" Boom, and he lets it go, and that's sort of like, that's the world right now. We're there, and some guy's joking about us about the seatbelt not being on. So anyway, let's pray. Lord, thanks for your word. Thanks for informing us about what we should be looking for, and pray that you'll give us wisdom and understanding as to how we see these things unfold. Pray you give opportunities to share the gospel. Bless us this week. In Jesus' name, amen.